Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to our Tuesday Nishcast coming at you on the 21st of November. Big up Aotearoa, big up yourself. Hope you're enjoying the springtime of vibration throughout these great lands. We are here to chat through some Aotearoa sporting matters, and we are from theniche-cage.com, where you can read about some Aotearoa sporting matters. We've got a Plunkett Shield notebook, Halliburton Johnston Shield notebook. We got a Blackcaps test squad previewy thingy-majig ahead of their series against Bangladesh, and we've also got a rather optimistic perspective on the Blackcaps pipeline, which, I don't know, there's some things in Aotearoa sport that, like, some people are super negative about, and there's some other things that, like, well, yeah, there's some things that people are super negative about when the alternative positive perspective is so easy to enjoy as well. We do keep it honest. We do keep it real. We do keep it a full steak and cheese pie whenever there is a stinky whiff in any Aotearoa sporting situation. Blackcaps isn't one of them. I don't really think the All Whites is one of them. You could go on and on and on. There's a lot of good. The Warriors, Kiwi NRL, Michael Maguire is Kiwi's coach. Like, there's a lot of people out there, whether it's old mate tweeting up a storm with Sarpreet Singh about his inside sources about All Whites camp. There's a lot of people who just want to be negative, it seems. And some of these sports, they warrant that negativity. Others, everything's kind of all good. And the Blackcaps pipeline is really, really good. I don't really see any flaws in the men's cricketing development system in Aotearoa, and you can read about it because we've got an endless supply of seamers coming up. We've got some fantastic batters. We've got spinners in every class, so it's good times for the Blackcaps pipeline. You can read about that on our website, theniche-cage.com, as well as National League recaps. I'm sure we will get some All Whites content and a deep dive into the football Ferns squad, much of which we will be chatting through today as well. So we're coming at you in the podcast form. We've got the website with the deep dives. We've also got the Monday, Friday newsletter via Substack, thenichecage.substack.com, where we do flex through these ideas on a Monday and Friday, strictly writing about Aotearoa sport. That's it. No goofy stuff from overseas, strictly Aotearoa sport in our newsletters. So check in with those. And yesterday on the Monday, I did offer a bit of a player scout from the Auckland men versus Aotearoa Māoris game, in which you had 3 players from the Warriors competing, as well as some fringy lads. Like, maybe Patrick Sipley wants to get involved and revitalize his NRL career because he's massive, he's fit, and he looks ready to go. But there are 3 juniors who are in the Warriors system: Harry Durbin, Sefania Kauli-Lupo, and Makaya Tafua. I did write about them in our Monday newsletter as an example of what you can expect. And I'll say Harry Durbin, SG ball prop, who has also played, he was playing men's footy in Fox Memorial. He was playing New Zealand National Premiership. He was playing for the Aotearoa Māoris. It seems like he's a good prop. You know, if you're under 19s and you're doing all that as after playing SG ball, it seems like you're all right. Sefania Kauli-Lupo, he's a half, but he was playing on the wing for Auckland Vulcans because he's massive, and who knows what his forecasted position is, because he just seems like an exceptional utility. And Makaya Tafua, young hooker from Christchurch, which, again, people want to poo-poo the Warriors system. Well, you've got Etuati Fukafuka, who's a really powerful dummy half, and then you've got Makaya Tafua, who's more of a slow-mo, smooth, crisp dummy half. So you've got 2 different types of dummy halves right there. Seems useful. So I wrote about them in the Monday newsletter. You also went deep into Aotearoa footballing matters. We don't have any New Zealand under 17 on today's podcast menu, so do you have any takeaways from their disastrous World Cup campaign?
No. It's probably why we're not talking about it, and why I haven't really been able to write about it, is that they just went and were the worst, like the weaker team in all 3 of their fixtures, conceded at least 3 goals in every game. only scored once, which was a last minute penalty against Germany, but it was a tough group. And these under 17s tours, it's like the first opportunity players get to play internationally. You just you just don't know what you're going to get. And I looked in through the history of New Zealand at these under 17 World Cups, the men's one in particular, and like there's instances, yeah, there's a couple instances where they made the knockouts and get instances where they've been able to get draws and wins and some positive results. There's also other instances where they've lost all three games and conceded more times than they did in this one. So it's just it seems like at that level it's a little bit of a lottery, and also ultimately particularly an under 17 World Cup, because at least the under 20 World Cup, like these players will be the bulk of these players from this group will be in the next wave of the under 20s. So this is almost preparation for that, and that's probably why you see sort of better team performances in those 20s stages. But ultimately, you look back at the under 17 squads from each particular World Cup, you don't really, unless they do something amazing, you don't really think about how they did in terms of performances or results. You just look at like who was the talent in that squad and what have they gone on to become. So that's more the test of what they'll do, is how many of these dudes go on to be professional footballers. And if they're not very many, then we can say, well, maybe that's why they didn't do too well. But if there are several, and there are a couple like really good prospects in this squad, Mali Luluai probably front and center there, suddenly you think, well, yeah, okay, maybe it didn't matter so much there. The development of the players is a little more the desired outcome from these tournaments, and you just don't know what that looks like until at least 3 to 5 years down the track.
That is part of our Monday newsletter via Substack. Sign up, you just get lots of Aotearoa sporting notes and a little bit of music as well. Did drop the new Fable track, Please, which is another banger from Fable. Big up South Auckland music. On this week, maybe tomorrow, maybe Thursday. We'll wait and see. We'll record our subscriber podcast, which is available for the Patreon whānau and those with a paid Substack subscription. Probably going to go deep into some, I'd say some Plunkett Shield youngsters, some more Blackcaps cricket, maybe some more insights, maybe some more scouting from your under 17 World Cup. How about that? We'll chuck that on the hoist. We might chat through that as well, because that is the fun angle of this, is just highlighting some of the best talents from Aotearoa who are rising up the ranks. That's what we're doing with Plunkett Shield. That's what we do Kiwi NRL Juniors. That's what we do with the football as well. So you can support the Niche Case directly through Patreon, patreon.com/our Niche Case, or via Substack with a paid Substack subscription. Monday, Friday newsletter is completely free. And then there's that paid option as well, which gets you an extra podcast every week, the subscriber podcast. And with that podcast, we drop a whole lot of notes as a little bit extra as well. Let's get a bit of mindfulness.
A little bit of mindfulness coming from surrealist artist Salvador Dali, who said, where's the thing gone? He said, don't be afraid of perfection because you're never going to reach it.
What's if like everything's perfect? Because everything's perfect as it is.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Life is perfection. So
in a state of mind, I suppose that is true. But in which case, if you try to replicate it, you can't, right? You can't replicate it because it's already there. You can't. You're just making a copy of a thing which is not the thing itself. Therefore, you can't repeat perfection. I think, yeah. I think we've spun this out into a couple different twists, but I think that adds up.
I don't think you've published your New Zealand Breakers exploration just yet.
Yeah, you know why? Because I found out there is a FIBA break coming up, which I was surprised about because neither the Tall Blacks nor the Aussie Boomers actually have games on the forecast. There's just a break. There's just a FIBA break with no FIBA games going on for the two countries that are relevant to. But that's like a 10-day break between or 2 weeks basically for the Breakers between games. So this is the that'll be out later in the week, I should imagine.
So that will be coming up. And you did tease it a few weeks ago, and since then the Breakers have had a couple of wins and a couple of losses. They last week they defeated Tasmania, which was cool. That was an away win, and then hosting Illawarra. I'll just have to see how Illawarra is tracking this season, because
good luck. Good luck when you see the answer to that.
They're the best team. They are the worst team, and they
are the worst team.
Well, they're tied for the worst team with the New Zealand Breakers by the looks of it. So shout out to them. They're not doing as bad as I thought. A home loss against the Illawarra Hawks, it was a bit stinky. And the Breakers do have this kind of stinky whiff. They're probably the stinkiest, whiffiest team in Aotearoa sport, I'd suggest, for how they overlook and ignore talent from New Zealand. I don't think the Hawks were that good. I thought the Breakers were like somehow found a way to lose that game. And a lot of chat about one player, Will McDowell-White, who's a good player, good pick and roll exponent and all of that other stuff. But there's enough. There's other good players in the Breakers. There's other players who can execute basketball fundamentals like Will McDowell-White, at least against the other worst team in your home stadium. So it was it wasn't the most encouraging Breakers loss, but they do seem to, like, when there's that desperation, they'll get a win, but then they'll just lose again and generate that desperation to get another win, to get another loss, and the cycle flows along. Have you seen any more positive signs or any more negative signs since your last update a few weeks ago? You did go deep into it, so you can check out the previous podcast. It was a few weeks ago where you did highlight some issues with the Breakers, but since then, is it kind of plateau? Is it worse? Is it better?
I think probably plateaued, because they have started to do the thing where they're like you said there, like a win one, lose one, win one, lose one kind of thing. Problem is they've dug themselves a hole by losing something like 6 of their first 7 or whatever the statistic was, which means that just trading wins and losses is going to do nothing. That's not going to get them into the semifinals. So to do that, they're going to have to go on a winning streak. Like, they're going to have to start winning bunches of games in a row. And they just don't look like a team that has that level of consistency. And injuries haven't helped. Will McDowell-White is a guy who facilitates a lot for other players, which is important. And Silent Sheatham is probably supposed to be one of their better defenders, and he's not there. It's stunning how it's happened, because 2 seasons ago, they were the worst defensive team in the NBL, and they came dead last and had their worst ever season. Then they made the final and went to a deciding final game in the final against a really good Sydney Kings team with the best defense in the NBL. Now they're back to being one of, if not the worst defensive teams in the NBL. And it's just so weird how that can swing so extremely between season to season to season. They just, even in their win against Tasmania on Thursday or Friday or whichever day it was, they were like 17 points up at one point in the second half, and they only just hung on to win that. I think there was like a Isaiah Leafa steal and layup in the last 20 seconds or something to really clinch it, when otherwise Tasmania would have been going down the other end to tie it up. Like, that's the lack of sort of game management and control there. I think it does stem from just not being a good defensive team, because you can't get stops when you need them. And then sometimes when you're hanging on to a lead and the momentum's starting to go the other way, and the other team feels like they can score whenever they get the opportunity, you're just at the mercy of, will our next shot go in or will it miss? And basketball, like, as many shots miss as go in, right? It's the best shooters are shooting like 60% from the field, and that's because they're shooting up close. Best 3-point shooters are shooting like, unless you're Tara Reid in the WNBL, best 3-point shooters are shooting like, although she missed 2 on the weekend, doing 0 of 2 from deep. So she's dropped from 80% to 67%, I think, which I'm assuming is still the best in the league. But like the best 3-point shooters might shoot 40% if they're really, really good. It's more likely to miss than make. And it's just the Breakers are in that spot where they don't seem to be able to control and manage games, even when they have guys who can score. Parker Jackson Cartwright, I think, is the leading scorer in the league, and Anthony Lamb does some outrageous things as a scorer. and in a different light as a human being, which is one of those things. I didn't expect that to be a sort of, allegations against him. I didn't expect that to be something that was covered very widely in the NBL, because the NBL has very in-house media. A lot of the production stuff is from the NBL itself, which means they're not going to criticize themselves or bring shade upon players within it. Even the guys outside it have chummy connections with the NBL media for obvious reasons, trying to access and whatnot. So I didn't expect that to be a yarn, and it hasn't been. But disappointing, but whatever. The Breakers have talent there, but like we've seen from them in previous years, it's the type of talent where they haven't picked a team. They haven't picked the best player for the role. They've just tried to find the most talented player, chuck them all out there at once and see what they can do. And it just doesn't gel. And it's exactly what they've done in previous years when they sucked. And a lot of that just gets swept under the rug because it was like, oh, well, it was during the pandemic, so of course they were going to struggle. It's like, yeah, yes, that's a valid reason, but it's not the only reason. And that just kind of, the pandemic stuff exacerbated existing issues within the Breakers, and that talent over fit aspect was a major thing in their recruitment for 3 or 4 years, which continually led them to being kind of bad. Last year, they picked a team that just everything clicked together. The jigsaw puzzle was complete. And this year, they went away from it, signing players in the same position as each other, signing a bunch of ball handlers who all want to take the last shot. And then that limits guys like McDowell White or Finn Delaney or whoever, who you probably want taking a lot more shots than they do, but they're out there trying to set up other guys because other guys are a little more aggressive about it. It just, yeah, it's stinky. It whiffs, and it whiffs even more because it's repeating the same mistakes that we thought they'd moved past. And apparently we just gave them too much credit last year. I don't know. Last year was a brilliant season, but you have to maintain that if you want to be a great team. And Breakers teams of the past, a decade ago, they did that. They were competitive every single year. They had a formula. They knew how to win basketball games. They had leaders out there. They had consistency, and they have not been able to find that so far this year. I expect them to keep doing the kind of, I think they're too good to be last. But I expect they'll probably do the same thing of what we've seen in the last couple of weeks of win one, lose one, and then you don't make enough inroads in the table to be able to make the semifinals, and their first 2 months is gonna be the thing that costs them in that case. They might click, they might just figure it out. Modi Mayor is a great coach, and he will have ideas, but they've dug themselves such a big hole, and it's not looking too likely right now.
There's too many suits on the coaches bench as well. There's a lot of suit wearing and
a lot.
Like NBA, NBL, they've all got fairly relaxed dress codes nowadays, and just chuck on something a bit more casual, bro, because you all look a bit weird on the coach's bench. Neil Wagner, he looks great in whites, and he's been wearing the whites over the last few weeks. He's been playing for Northern Districts in Blackcaps Shield. Didn't play every game though. He was in and out, and now he's back in the Blackcaps test squad. We do have this series against Bangladesh starting soon. First game is next Tuesday. And yes, Wagner comes in for Matt Henry. And this is a fascinating situation. I did write about this in the Monday newsletter as well, including Neil Wagner's last 5 years of test bowling. Averages, most important here. 2019, average of 17.8. 2020, average of 24.2. 2021, average of 28. 2022, average of 33.2. 2023, this year, average of 40.9. So each year has got worse, starting at 17, going up to 41. So that's Neil Wagner's test bowling. He has also been in and out of the Northern Districts team because he's gathering a few more injuries. He missed a bunch of cricket last summer due to injuries, and, well, Wagner's 37 years old. I'm completely fine for him to be in the test squad, because what are you going to need in Bangladesh? You're going to need a Neil Wagner-like bowler. So why not?
Workhorse.
Why not just get Neil Wagner? Like, he's the guy. I think he's better in these conditions than Matt Henry as well, because Matt Henry, especially if he's got some injury niggles, you don't want Matt Henry being the workhorse. You want him nibbling the ball around, bowling a nice length, getting a bit of swing, bit of seam. And I don't necessarily want Jamieson being a workhorse either. Like, he has the stature, but he's got a bit of an iffy back. It's like Ben Stokes being England's workhorse. He's being your workhorse on one knee. That doesn't seem
maybe
like,
half a knee. Yeah,
it doesn't seem ideal. Neil Wagner, he is a little bit injured of late, but he's going to keep showing up when he's asked to bowl in Bangladesh. So I don't think it's that bad. And he's also the best guy just to inject into a test series, part of the World Test Championship, new Test Championship, need some wins, perhaps a series win over Bangladesh. You need someone reliable. There's no way I would select a young seamer in this situation. And part of that is because of the Blackcaps pipeline, which I alluded to. There is a clear development structure in place. The young seamers, they play a little bit of ODIs, a little bit of T20. The young seamers are the dudes who play New Zealand A. The young seamers are the dudes who play every single Plunket Shield game, every single Ford Trophy, Super Smash game. They're not the dudes you call up for a test. Because those dudes, I think this is the best case, and I am sure it's what the Blackcaps do. Last summer, Kugelheim, Blair Tickner. If there's a need for a test seamer this summer, I think they'll just go Kugelheim or Bracewell, because they're both among the best bowlers in Plunket Shield still. The Wagner, this is like his last chance, though, I'd say. Not last chance, but a bit of a last hurrah coming up here from Wagner, because if he doesn't perform, then the correlation of his mana and his wicket taking is getting a bit wonky. He's not taking the wickets, so it's just his mana. Whereas at the moment, he's still got enough wickets to keep up with his mana. At some point, those wickets are going to diminish, and it's going to be his mana, which, given the depth we have and the options we have and the talent we have, I think the mana won't make him a certainty in these situations. Do you see this situation differently to me? If so, what tickles your antenna?
I would say antenna being tickled by I don't know. I think I do see it quite similar. I might have phrased it slightly different in that I think you can play Wagner in this series as the workhorse above some of those other guys in a weird way, because it kind of matters less if he gets injured at this point. I think we kind of have to accept he's at the end of his test career, and that's one of those things where it's like he's been a great bowler for the Blackcaps for many years. And when great bowlers, great players, full stop, come towards the end of their careers, they're probably not going to be producing as much. That's also where you want to give them the last little swing. You want to let them loose, and so as much as anything, so the fans can enjoy them, understanding that they might not be around that much longer. Like I think of Ross Taylor had a little bit of a sort of, his was more of a downward spiral towards the very end of his career, only the very end. But there was definitely a point where he was hanging on because he kind of wanted to finish off on his terms, but wasn't really scoring any runs. In fact, it was series against Bangladesh, wasn't it, that he polished off with, and then made up for the lack of runs by taking a wicket with his last act. Neil Wagner, like if Matt Henry goes out there and gets his extends his injury to where he's going to be missing home summer stuff, if Kyle Jamieson does the same thing, which is still a risk because he is still there, but you back him at least. He's been such a good test bowler since he came on the scene. That's an issue for the Blackcaps moving forward. Admittedly, they don't play a lot more test cricket for a while, but that's also where this comes into the equation as well, because Wagner only plays test cricket. He might play some Super Smash, and he does play some Plunket Shield now and then, but that's to keep him ready for test cricket. Matt Henry plays everything, and Kyle Jamison plays everything when he's available to play everything. There is a there is a bigger risk towards those guys getting more injured, and where it's just not there for Wagner, who probably won't be required again for another couple months anyway, because I don't think we play more tests after this until like February or something like that. At least not in the home summer. And if he's not as good as he was himself in recent years, you also not picking him against himself, right? You're picking him against, okay, well, maybe he's not as good, but who are the alternatives? Which probably is Kugelein, Sickner, Bracewell. Is Wagner better than them right now? Yeah, probably. It helps that he did take a few wickets to help clean up a Northern Districts victory the other day, which admittedly, a lot of that's bowling to tail enders, but also a lot of his test wickets have been bowling to tail enders as well. He's really good at getting tail enders out. It's one of his secret weapons. And Bangladesh does have a relatively long tail by reputation. A little bit better now than it has been in the past, but definitely their top order is expected to score the bulk of their test runs. I don't know. It just seems like the natural thing. I was a little bit surprised to see him not picked initially, and I thought of tours to like I think the UAE was one where they've been there in recent times where he's struggled and on flat wickets. I don't necessarily know that the Bangladesh wickets will be flat as much as they will be slow, which is also not his best. Not his best conditions, but then it's not anyone in the Blackcaps seam department's best conditions, as we saw at the World Cup in India. So you at least give the guy who can bowl short and rough people up even at 125 k's an hour. You can still do that. So no dramas. I think it makes a natural thing, and it makes a natural bit of logic, and I am looking forward to an opportunity to continue to see Neil Wagner for hopefully at least one more test summer. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the last summer, though, as much because of the injuries as because of the form, because at some point you're asking a lot of yourself to keep coming back from injury and after injury after injury, even if you're playing extremely good. And if you're averaging 40 and doing that, the motivation might leak away. He does have a family as well, he's got other things going on in his life. So hopefully he can add a few more wickets to the tally and boost himself up. I don't know where he is on the overall bowling records for the Blackcaps, but I'm sure he's up near the top.
So he's basically there to bowl bounces or bowl full. He's going to try reverse swing, and he's going to bowl short. He's literally the dude who started the bowling short thing. Well, obviously there's series in the past where they've targeted players with the pull shot, but as far as the consistency of this is what Neil Wagner does, he's that guy. That's why he is there. Like, you can ask someone else to do that job, but as we've seen, it gets a bit dodgy when you're asking a swing bowler to bowl short. Like, it's just not as effective. That's why I think last summer you saw a bit more Scott Kugelein, you saw a bit more Blair Tickner, because they were looking for that type of bowler as opposed to the nibbling it, swinging it, seaming it. And the Blackcaps in this squad, they're going to have three seamers: Southey, Jamison, and Wagner. So Wagner might not even play. You might just go Southey, Jamison, because then you've got Santner, Sodhi, Ajaz Patel, Rachin Ravindra, and Glenn Phillips. So you can get 4 spin options in that bowling unit, because Ravindra's going to bat, Santner's going to be an all-rounder, Phillips might not be first 11, which is all good, and then you've got Sodhi and Patel as your frontline spinners. So that's a pretty decent bowling attack to take to Bangladesh. And you got someone?
Neil Wagner in Bangladesh. Well, Neil Wagner versus Bangladesh in his career. 7 matches starting from 2013. Most recent was last year when they came here. 7 matches, 39 wickets at an average of 21.09. In Bangladesh, only one of those tests is in Bangladesh, but he took 5 for 64 in one of those innings, took 7 wickets overall in that test match, and averaged 16.57. So that was in 2013. That was a decade ago. But he's taken wickets in Bangladesh before, but probably more importantly, he's played test cricket in Bangladesh before and knows that experience, which I think is kind of what you're alluding to as well before about why you'd pick him over, for example, a developmental type future thinking younger player.
And all these, like, I do love the young talent, do love the Kiwi NRL junior talent, the young footballing talent. Like, all these youngsters from Aotearoa sport are fantastic, absolutely freaky, unique, X Factor talents. But the Plunkett Shield first stanza, first 11, All Stars outfit, there's not much space for these youngsters because the best players are still the older players, the experienced troopers, the domestic battlers with a bit of Blackcaps funk sprinkled on top. So let me announce a first draft of the opening stanza All-Star Plunkett Shield first 11.
Drum roll, please.
Sean Solier, opening batter. And we've chucked Tom Bruce in the opening batter slot as well. Henry Nichols, batting number 3. Joe Carter, number 4. Nick Kelly, number 5. Mitch Hay, wicketkeeper, batting number 6. He's the only youngster. Doug Bracewell, number 7. Nathan Smith, batting number 8. And then we've got Kugelline, Ajaz Patel, Jacob Duffy. So a couple of things there. Next up, seamers, we're talking Jacob Duffy. I think he's basically 30 years old. So he's not young. So when you say we need younger seamers, we want Jacob Duffy, he's the same age as everyone else. So forget the ages. I gave the nod to Patel because he's just been solid. I think Addy Ashok's been really good. He's taken a lot of wickets, but he's been Auckland's busiest bowler. And I think if you give a lot of spinners that amount of overs, they'll take some wickets. The more interesting one was Louis Dalport. Shout out DJ Louis Slippers, one of my favorite musical things. And anytime I see Louis or Louis, I think of Louis Slippers, 10-pound bag. Louis Dalport has helped Auckland. He's only played the last 2 games, but he's come in as a second spinner to Ashok lefty. And I was thinking about putting him in there, but I just went safe and sound with Patel. You've got 2 really good all-rounders, 2 of the best seamers. Well, yeah, the 4 best seamers right now in Aotearoa cricket are Jacob Duffy, Scott Kugelline, Nathan Smith, and Doug Bracewell. It's those guys. Mitch Hay, wicketkeeper. Joe Carter scored a 50-plus knock in every single game. Henry Nichols, the non-ball tamperer. He's been in good form, hasn't scored as many runs in the last game or last 2 games. Tom Bruce actually dipped out of action, but he scored runs when he was playing, and he's basically the best batter in domestic cricket, so he's got to be there. Sean Solier, double 100. And Nick Kelly's just always scoring runs. He's found a nice little groove since moving up to Wellington. He was in that A series against Australia this year, and he's there or thereabouts. And I keep having to put this out there as well because, like, you've got Doug Bracewell, Nathan Smith, Scott Kugelline, Ajaz Patel, Jacob Duffy. Like, these are really good domestic bowlers who are a bit older. Nathan Smith might be the youngest. I think he's like 25. You've also got Henry Shipley. You've also got Will O'Rourke. You've also got Zach Folks, who is my favourite domestic cricketer. Zach Folks, first stanza, favourite domestic cricketer. You've also got Christian Clark. You've also got Matt Fisher. You've also got Ray Toole. Like, there's no shortage of youngsters rising up the ranks in domestic cricket. How do you feel about that first 11 All-Star outfit?
I like it. It's got me excited for what I've already been thinking about, which is starting to put together my, at least in my head, I haven't quite got the notebook out yet for it, my New Zealand National League team of the season stuff, men's and women's. It's one of the annuals. I will note as well, and in light of what you're saying earlier, I did find it's not always easy to find some of these stats, but other people seem to have access to stuff that I don't. So I did find a thing about it was from the Hawke's Bay Times, I think, hyping up how Napier City Rovers have been playing heaps of under-20 players. And, there's the rules with under-20 players in the National League. And they listed the top 4 teams for playing under-20s, like in terms of percentage of overall minutes, under-20s players. It was obviously the Wellington Phoenix Reserve, who were like 99% under-20 players. Napier City were up there, Petone were up there, and I think Auckland United were up there. Guess where those four teams finished on the table after the full round robin thing? They would be in no particular. Well, yeah, go take a guess.
Yeah, are you going to ask me, or are you just big up in yourself here?
Well, it was rhetorical at first, but then
Right,
you leaned
it's
into
all
the
right
microphone, so you know.
because I know
I
the
think you're
answer.
gonna guess right though. Yeah, the answer in no particular order would be last, second to last, third to last, and fourth to last. Like the team that played the most young players, which is like good value, and it's something to hold on to, and it's good future proofing for your team and all this kind of thing. But they also were the teams that lost the most games, conceded the most goals, etc., etc., etc. Um, yeah, I don't know. On Plunkett Shield, I see. Yeah, I see you found the same trend there of just the best players are the best players for a reason, and it's because they've been around for a while and they know what they're doing. And Tom Bruce has been scoring runs in copious quantities for a long time. Average just shade under 50, I think, in first class cricket, which is still nuts, especially because that seems to be going up. And those, like, that's again, that's what it takes to get into recognition for making the Blackcaps is to be able to have that consistency, which the Breakers don't have, year after year after year. It's performances that's not just like you had one good season. Okay, let's see three more of those, and then you might make the New Zealand 18 kind of thing. Unless you're like a phenomenon from a youth team, which there have been a couple of those coming through now on occasion. I think we can all see why Rachin Ravindra now got his chance in international cricket earlier than most seem to skip ahead of the queue. Yeah, well, you can see why they picked him now. That is the same trend in so many sports and in cricket more than potentially any other.
So the one youngster in the team is Mitch Hay, and he's really interesting because he's emerging as the best he's emerging as the best emerging wicketkeeper. Like the wicketkeeper situation in Aotearoa has just been like really solid, mature lads. You got Dane Cleaver, Cam Fletcher, Tim Seifert, Tom Blundell when he's available. And Otago's got Max Chu. Max Chu is definitely improving as a batter. So he's like Mitch Hay's just come out of the gate scoring runs and being a good wicketkeeper. So I've got Mitch Hay ahead of Max Chu, but Max Chu's going to be in the mix for a while, assuming he continues to settle in the Otago middle order scoring runs across the three formats. But Mitch Hay is just slotted straight in there. And I don't think he's I don't think he's overtaking Dane Cleaver or Tim Seifert for a Blackcaps wicket-keeping job. But he's ahead of Cleaver in this first 11 team. And that's pretty interesting. But I think white ball, you're probably going to still see a lot of Seifert, a lot of Dane Cleaver, and like Blundell isn't a first 11 white ball player right now. He's competing for that as well. So there is plenty of depth in the Aotearoa wicketkeeper ranks. Speaking of young Aotearoa talent, that was the major theme in the first round of Halliburton Johnston Shield, HBJ Shield, as it's known in the streets. Unfortunately, the best players were Papatua Nuku and Ranganui because there was plenty of rain around this weekend that definitely impacted results. So Wellington and Otago were the only series to play 2 games. Otago won the first game. Wellington won the second game. Central won the first game against Canterbury, and then the Sunday game was rained out almost 3/4 of the way through, so that's a bummer, but they finished one game there. And up north, Saturday game was rained out between Northern and Auckland. Sunday game saw an Auckland win, so no team had 2 wins, and we keep it moving. It's hard to really digest what happened this weekend in the context of the competition when there was a bit disjointed with rain impacting those games, but there was a clear trend of youngsters making their mark over more fancied players. Like various white ferns didn't really perform, and various domestic troopers didn't perform either. I thought the Northern versus Auckland game on Sunday was the best example of this because Auckland were battling. They had lost a bunch of wickets thanks to the young seamers from Northern Districts, Lucy Boucher and Kaylee Knight. They both took 3 wickets each. So then Prue Catton did she play National League?
She has been no, she hasn't played National League. Last year she was with Auckland United, who I think she was an unused sub when they won the Kate Shepherd Cup. Didn't get on the field, so not quite the Adam Milne achievement. But then this year, because then the summer season comes up and she goes and plays cricket because she's contracted with Auckland. This year she was with Ellerslie, who also qualified for National League, but yeah, still didn't play because cricket takes precedent when there's better pathways involved probably for her.
So she scored 49 runs, batting 6. And then Josie Penfold batting 8. She scored 58. They were the only Auckland batters to score over 20 runs. And you've got Maddie Green, Bella Armstrong, Izzy Gaze, Sachi Shari. They're all in this batting lineup. Same thing for Northern Districts, though, because 17-year-old Tash Wakeland, she scored 59 runs, and then no one else scored over 20 runs. Nancy Patel, Caitlin Gurry, Jess Watkin, Bernadine Bezodenhout, Sam Barrybowl, Amar Richardson. None of them scored runs, but the 17-year-old did. And the Auckland bowling attack is really funky as well, because Molly Penfold, she's the certified white fern, apparently one of the best bowling prospects in Aotearoa, but I don't know, Brie Illing is really tall. She's a lefty, so now you've got her and PJ Watkins from England has come over to play for Otago. She's another lefty. You got 2 lefties in the domestic circuit now. I love the talent of Amy Hucker, fantastic seamer. Josie Penfold's also really tall, really skillful with the ball. And then you've got a 17-year-old leggy, Rashika Jaswal, who loves to give it lots of flight, and she is a good talent as well. I mean, I was more interested in them than the White Fern talent in that bowling attack. So that game just encapsulated the whole vibe nicely, where the young talent were the best players, and they outperformed more fancied White Ferns in that game. Auckland did win that game. Other bits and bobs from around the grounds. Georgia Atkinson and Michaela Gregg scored runs for Central. I think Michaela Gregg finishes with the most runs of the first weekend. 123 runs, 2 innings, and a strike rate of 111. So she was the only player, well, she's got the highest strike rate after the opening weekend of batters who scored 50 plus runs. Obviously, she batted twice, so that's going to be helpful, but she was clearly in a nice groove, whacking the ball. Atkinson's a funky talent for Central. Lots of reverse scoops, lots of regular scoops, and I also love the Central trio of Hannah Rowe, Claudia Green, Rosemary Mayer, probably the best seam bowling trio in Halliburton-Johnston Shield. And it's a good little spot for the spinners, young spinners, Flora Devonshire and Ocean Bartlett. It's a good place for them to build with those really strong 3 seamers right there. Wellington, Jess McFadden scored runs. Her list day average is comparable to Sophie Devine, Susie Bates, and Amy Satterthwaite. It's not bad company. And I also really like Zara Jetley's talent. She took 3 wickets in one of those games, and she's just a really good cricketer who has a legendary Super Smash average, I think off the top of my head. You've also got Canterbury's best players. Who were they? Jodie Dean, Izzy Sharp, youngsters on the rise. They scored the most runs for Canterbury. And you also had Gabby Sullivan starting the season straight away, 3 wickets. That's what she does. It's almost like Willow Rourke status. Well, I'd say Willow Rourke is almost a Gabby Sullivan status, where it just seems like a regular 3 wickets. Every innings, 3 wickets, 2 wickets, 3 wickets, 2 wickets. That's what you want from the best bowlers. And Sarah Asmussen also took some wickets there. Otago, Emma Black. She is fantastic. She took 4 wickets in one of those games for Otago, ripped through the Wellington batting lineup. Again, Wellington batting lineup. Rebecca Burns, McFadden, Georgia Plimmer, Lee Kasperick. A lot of talent, but Emma Black ripped through it for the first game. I think they did get their revenge. And she has, like, Emma Black, will probably play for the White Ferns at some stage, along with Gabby Sullivan. They're probably the next best up and coming seamers who have got through a lot of domestic overs at this stage. And one question I have is, like, who's going to score the runs for Otago? Because if Susie Bates isn't playing, there's no Kate Ibrahim, and they've got some really good batters. They've got like Olivia Gain, Bella James, Caitlin Blakely. But then Polly Inglis scored a few runs in this game, but they need a dominant batter, and they don't think, like, a lot of their success is dependent on Susie Bates and Kate Ibrahim. Neither of them are there right now, so who will score the runs for Otago? It's probably the biggest question mark, where every other batting unit, you just feel like, yeah, well, whether it's a youngster, whether it's a senior player, someone will step up and score runs every game. Like Atkinson and Greg scored the runs this weekend for Central. Next weekend, it might be Natalie Dodd, one of the best domestic batters going around. Canterbury, Jodie Dean, Izzy Sharp scored runs. You know, maybe it's Natalie Cox. Maybe Kate Anderson comes back and scores runs. Maybe it's Laura Hughes, the wicketkeeper, who had a good weekend as well. Mentioned the Auckland Northern batting lineups. They're pretty stacked with talent, but it was the youngsters who performed this weekend. Otago don't have a standout youngster batter, and they don't really have the reliable, consistent domestic batters. When I say reliable, consistent, I'm talking about Jess McFadden, Natalie Dodd, those characters who just churn out runs in domestic cricket. So lots of young talent on display. We'll be interested next weekend and the weekends after, which youngsters sustain this talent, and then which mature, experienced players start to find their groove. Because there weren't many experienced players scoring runs or taking wickets in this round, and I expect it to change. But if it doesn't change, then we have to really tap in with the changing nature of HBJ Super Smash Women's Cricket as well. Should we explore a bit of all whites?
Yeah, let's explore some all whites.
The all
they
whites
lost to Greece.
Yeah, they had a loss to Greece, and from an outside perspective, again, that's a losable game. Greece is good at football, probably better than New Zealand at football by every measurement, by every metric. And that seems to be a zone where the All Whites are at right now, where they're playing a lot of, like you mentioned it prior to the World Cup, football fans were playing a lot of games against better teams, better footballing nations, and they were losing. And that's what happens.
Except at the World Cup itself, where they lost to the weak team and beat the best team. Drew with the other one.
But the All Whites, these teams are better at football than the All Whites. And I think that's just a key reminder as the All Whites work their way through these games. And I did have this noted down. The All Whites also haven't earned expectations. At no stage have the All Whites put together wins in a consistent good groove to earn expectations of winning. That doesn't mean we're negative about the All Whites. They just simply haven't done it. Like the Blackcaps have performed consistently in their cricketing landscape to earn some expectations, right? The Kiwis have got a few more wins now. They're earning expectations. The football Ferns stood up against Norway and earned expectations before, as you said, a little bit of a letdown.
A letdown and a let up as well. Yeah, they balanced each other out. They just happened the other way around.
I think this applies to a lot of New Zealand sports where you can just a lot of the sports we talk about, they have earned us to be like really hopeful and expecting wins. While I'm positive about the men's football talent and what is happening with the All Whites, they do play teams who are better than them, and they usually lose, which is understandable. But you need to keep your expectations in check, because it's like the Warriors. The best, yeah. So let me fix it up here. It's like the Warriors. Every year, New Zealand media would say the Warriors are expected to do this. The media would push up the expectations based on nothing. So then when those expectations weren't met, they lost the plot, and it's big dramas. but your expectations weren't actually dependent on any positive sign or any change or any like, fundamental element. Apart from me liking the talent, apart from me having faith in baseball, Darren Baisley, big fan of him as All Whites coach. You know that. Apart from that, and maybe a positive disposition, I haven't. Yeah, the All Whites haven't earned any of that through wins against anyone or like real consistent, cohesive performances. So until they do that, expectations have to be measured. And like when you're coming up against Greece and coming up against genuine top 50 footballing nations in the world, these things probably happen, and you just keep it moving. Like there's no need for an investigation or any deep dive into why the All Whites suck. How do you vibe with that read of the situation?
Yeah, you know that bit that you said at the start of the podcast about how some sports seem to be just like predisposed to negative reactions. I think both national football teams of Aotearoa have that thing about them. I don't know exactly why. I think it's just the place in
I
the landscape.
I kind of just think football people in New Zealand just grumpy.
Well, there is a lot of English influence in football culture
They're
in New
definitely
Zealand, and
grumpy.
that's a grumpy culture, you know. So I think you might be onto something there, but also like it's just that thing. This like social trend that I see in sports all the time, where if a bad team loses once, they're a bad team. They lose a second time, they're getting worse. They lose a third time. Oh my god, how they still losing? It's like they're not doing anything worse. It's just the cumulative effect. People seem to think that that's somehow going backwards when what it is repeating the exact same evidence, repeating. Nothing's changed. That's like the definition of being static. That's not regressing in any way. It's just not moving forward either. And
A plateau.
people seem to not. Yeah, it's a plateau. People seem to think that plateaus are evidence of going backwards, which is not the case. It's you see it all the time, so often. It's just people feel like the need to have a reaction to anything. And I felt this about the Greece game where I sat there struggling to write about it. And I'm staring at my notes being like, yeah, but what's the angle? Like how do I get into this article? And in the end I decided I'm just going to park it until after the Island game, and hopefully when they've played twice in the window I'll have a bit more perspective. Partly because I do think there's an element of maybe they're targeting that game more. And looking at some of the selections, Michael Vowd starting in goal, Bindon and Tommy Smith at centre back, it shocked me a little bit seeing that trio. It's like if you're not going to go with your number one goalkeeper, surely you have to pick your best centre backs and vice versa. You can't go back beneath that on both of them. And I understand why they didn't really want to pick Max Crocombe because he played an FA Cup game a couple of days earlier, but also he's a goalkeeper. You know what I mean? He didn't run a marathon in that game. He's a goalkeeper. I think that's very weird. And it is a struggle that they always have right now, is that Max Crocombe is probably their best goalkeeper at this stage. Admittedly in a goalkeeping battle, which is something else I might write about in the coming weeks, just come to think of it. We'll see if that idea gestates or whatever. But he is probably in a battle where no one's really stood out. He's probably got the best claim, certainly on his club form. But his club form is at League One, which doesn't break for international breaks. So there's this constant push and pull between club and country. And I do think both the All Whites and the football Ferns, so basically New Zealand football, are probably a little bit too generous to clubs sometimes. When there is an international window there for a reason, like you can't just pick them; they have to release them. I think sometimes um, they accommodate the clubs a little bit too much, but it's also like friendly games. Ultimately, what's the risk? So I think, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe there's an element that they're targeting the Island game, but I found it so difficult to come up with anything insightful to say about the Greece game other than the better team won. And yet I'm seeing a lot of reactionary stuff online of like about how disastrous it was, kind of thing. Like, well, there's one country on the planet where people are scrolling through the international football results, seeing that Greece won 2-0 against New Zealand and thinking, that's terrible. How did that happen? What a shocker. And that's this country. You know, every other country in the world is looking at that and being like, Yeah, that's about right. 2-0 to Greece, that's about right. Greece are a good, solid team, lots of professional depth. They can rotate in ways that we can't. They have players that are probably on average at a higher level than we have. They have a really strong domestic league, which is professional and competitive, and plays in like top teams get to play in the European competitions and all this. Like they're just further ahead. And they are better than Ireland as well, by the way, because they're in the same qualifying group for the Euros as Ireland, and they beat them twice. So that's another reason to think maybe the Irish team are a little more vulnerable. They're not at the stage where they have been in the past, whereas Greece are actually kind of decent at the moment. But ultimately, that was my reaction to the All Whites game. Is like, yeah, it's disappointing. There's stuff because they didn't win because they didn't score a goal. There's stuff that they can fix. There's things I can critique, but also I don't think the result flattered either team. I think it's just about where it should have been expected to be because the All Whites were playing against a better team. And when you play against a better team, you're probably going to lose. And in a funny way, maybe the angle I'll end up writing about is that maybe the All Whites have finally graduated into the position where the football ferns are, where it's just you're right before that final hurdle of, okay, you've done everything. You've got the players. You've got the structure. You've established, and you're getting these regular games against these teams. But can you beat these better teams? That's really hard to do. That's actually harder probably than any of the other aspects. Is getting to where you can beat top 50 ranked teams. And I think Greece might be slightly outside there, but they're around that mark. Football ferns haven't been able to get over that hurdle. They've had several years in trying to do so, and there's reasons why. The All Whites are probably at that position now, and so I wonder if we might start to hear that same criticism over and over and over of people getting disappointed at and thinking they're going backwards because the exact same evidence is being presented to them game after game after game. But we'll see, because there's a lot to be positive about with this All White squad as well. It's just they don't become competitive overnight. You know, that's probably something that's going to need to take a couple of years to get closer to.
And like you mentioned, some of the niggle with the window and players being released. I think about the Blackcaps and how various players are used for ODIs, T20s. Like players are unavailable, players are injured. That's depth. That's how you build your depth. And suddenly Tyler Bindon, he's started an All Whites game as centre back. That might be useful. And
did all right too.
And there's a lot of, we'll get into the football ferns squad. There's a lot of football ferns players coming in and out. And I think at this stage of the cycle, it's what you want. You want players tasting the international experience, because it does seem international football is different too. Club football and all these other leagues. You got to get in there. You got to get some game time, get some exposure, be around the camp, be around the team, the manager, the senior players, connect to whatever culture, mana there is. That's you. Like, I get the All Whites and football ferns are at the same stage, but you get past that stage by having more good players playing.
Yeah.
And suddenly those players have played 20, 30, 40, 50 caps, because that's what the Kiwis have done, right? Like suddenly Fisher Harris
exactly.
He's won 3 grand finals in a row. That seems useful. Joseph Tapine, Sofa Solomona, Hughes, Dylan Brown, Nickel Crookster, they've all played lots of test footy. They've all played a lot of NRL games, and that seems like the thing that is going to propel the All Whites and the football ferns forward.
And you look at a country like Greece, and predominantly all their players have come through that Greek Super League, Premier League, whatever they call it, with a sort of consistent style of play and consistent football and culture. And you look at the All Whites having to pull players from England, Netherlands, Germany, Italy, Denmark, etc., Australia, America, like all over the world, and different cultures and stuff. That's necessary for them to get players into the highest level possible at club levels to develop them as players. But it's also something that might take longer for them to gel as a national team than other countries might in a similar situation. And that just is something we have to get through, you know, and the way you get through it is playing as often and regularly as possible. And if they lost to Greece in this game, well, if they beat Ireland tomorrow, everyone's forgotten the Greek result. If they lose to Ireland, then we think about that until the next window, and then we start focusing on those games. You know, you just got to keep playing regularly and ticking things over and racking up the experience. And that point about building the caps, 20, 30, 40, 50, that is very important and something I've sort of lingered on a few times in recent camps is these dudes they have had a reset button. There's a young all white squad there, and a lot of them are just not even at that 20 cap thing. Like they shouldn't really be senior players or key players for the team yet at that level of experience, but they are because of the state of the team. You just got to give them more time to settle in and adapt and figure out combinations and things like that. Which doesn't mean we should be accepting defeats, but it does mean that like you can't be expecting them either. To your original point, they've done. Yeah, I don't know when the last time the All Whites beat a team that's notably better than was, but it's not recently.
So we also had a football Ferns squad announced as well, and we're getting a bit of a New Zealand football check-in here with how the All Whites are going in international games, and now a football Ferns squad to play against Colombia, which will be in Bogota. There's one name on this list who I've never heard of, Katie Kitching. She's from Sunderland FC, AFC. Everyone else, yeah, I've seen them before, heard their names before, but Katie Kitchen, I don't think I've heard her name before. What's her story, and what's your general consensus on this football Ferns squad?
Yeah, I'd never heard Katie Kitching's name before either, so that was a completely new one. Out of the blue, she is an English midfielder who plays, for Sunderland. Interestingly, she did do a little bit of I think university stuff in the States, and then she came back and played for London City Lionesses last year as a teammate of Grace Neville, who is another English-born footballer who is committed to play for New Zealand. I have no idea how Katie Kitching is eligible. There was nothing in the press release that explained that or anything like that, but I trust that she is, and seems like a kind of a classy midfield operator, a good passer, distributor who will work hard, and the kind of player who should fit in quite nicely alongside the midfielders that we've got, who are extremely good ball winners. And the rest of the stuff is like, you win the ball, what do you do with it after that? That's where things become a little bit more sketchy. I think Malia Steinmetz is showing good growth. She's got a couple of assists since she's gone to Nordjylland in Denmark. So that's good progress. She's definitely someone who's fallen in that category. I think Rhea Purcell has been that in the past as well. Makes up for it with other ways because of how she wins the ball, and particularly winning from the press, pushing up. She's not in the squad though, and I suspect that's just a matter of she hasn't had a lot of game time for Spurs lately, and I think maybe there's a bit of just managing how she's going on the back of what was the long-term injury. And a lot of players who have had long-term injuries will say you might come back from it, but it takes quite a while after that until you start to feel normal again. Like you're not still managing the injury even after your recovery. So that'll also be why Annalie Longo's not there. There are a couple injured players. Millie Clegg's injured. Claudia Bunge is injured. I think Hannah Wilkinson is still suspended for 2 more games from getting sent off against Chile, which should, because no Clegg, no Wilkinson, should give Grace Jale an opportunity to play as centre forward, which I've been begging for months. I was saying this before the World Cup. I want to see what she was like, first of all, in partnership with Wilkinson, but since Wilkinson's not there, no dramas. Grace Jale centres forward all by herself. She's mostly been playing striker for Perth Glory this year, and Perth Glory have been, if not the best team in the A-League, one of the best teams in the A-League. They're tied with Melbourne City at the top, so that's nice. We've got a starting striker from each of the best teams in the A-League, although Wilkinson's not been converting the chances as much this season, whereas Jale, I think, has 3 goals. She's been excellent for them, really, and is thoroughly deserving of an opportunity to play that centre forward role rather than being stuck out on a wing. When she was injured a lot for the start of her year with the Phoenix, and then when she came back to fitness, started playing a lot, Phoenix got instantly better, and she ended up being their top goal scorer. She went to Canberra this next year. Canberra had been a pretty ranked team the year before. I think they were actually one of the teams that the Phoenix beat in year 1. Canberra get a whole lot better, and they didn't make the finals, but they were competing for finals after Grace Jale signed there. Perth Glory, been a little bit of a rebuilding team the last couple of years. Grace Jale goes there, they get better. So she's got a bit of a trend there going, where she's played for 3 different teams in the 3 different seasons in the A-League, but every team she plays for improves after she gets there. looking forward to that. Do note that there is no CJ Bot in this team. And that does appear to be something that's tactical rather than physical. Or she is an injury prone player, so I assumed at first she's just being rested. Seems that's not the case. It seems she's just been one of those ones who's been told, like, here's a couple of things you might want to work on, and then we'll bring you back next time. So don't think this is like a CJ Bot is no longer considered Football Ferns top team. I think it's maybe this is a tour to Colombia late in the year and early in a World Cup cycle, and this is the time to make a point, not only to her, but to the rest of the team of saying, well, no one's undroppable because Bot's been one of our best players for the last couple of years. And it's not immediately easy to see who's going to be the backup right back behind her. I would imagine Grace Neville gets an opportunity. I think she has shown some nice attacking things. That shocked me a little bit to see that Bot had been dropped. I do understand some of the ideas though, because if you watch how CJB plays, there's a lot of again, it's the same thing as the midfielders, insanely good at winning the ball. She's probably the best 1v1 tackler in the Football Ferns. And frankly, if you look at WSL stats since she's been there, probably one of the best 1v1 tacklers in the world because she's one of the best in the WSL, and the WSL is one of the best leagues. So that stacks up. But distribution after she gets the ball, the first touch, the passing, some of the decision making, not always been as up to scratch. Like there is one elite element of her game, and the other stuff does need to be lifted up. So I don't know. I don't mind that. Consider Jika Kumplova is not dropping a key player like this for a World Cup or a thing. Like when Michaela Moore didn't make Michaela Moore's a good example of someone who has been dropped recently and has responded with fantastic club form and now has been recalled. But also at the time when she was dropped, she just kind of wasn't one of the best options in that position. She hadn't been playing well enough to command that. Bot has been, but that's why this is happening for a friendly tour, not a major tournament or anything like that. But you can't say Jika Kumplova doesn't make the big decisions because she has been dropping some key players there, and also not just dropping key players in the past, but also bringing in some fresh ones. Because I'm looking at this squad and I'm love seeing Hannah Blake in there. I think she's been absolutely brilliant for Adelaide in the A-League this season. Pretty good for Perth last year as well. In the half of the season she was there, absolutely deserves this on form, and that's what you want to see is players who weren't in the World Cup pushing their way in and saying, well, actually pick me. I've been doing real well. I think there's 10 players from the World Cup squad who aren't in this current squad, and not all of those are explained by injuries and suspensions. There's also players who have lost their spot because others have been demanding it, and that is a level of competition for places that has not normally been the case for the Football Ferns. And it was a theme of this squad for the All Whites that I wrote about when I wrote about that one too. Is similar things were on show there, like Bill Tuiloma not getting picked. Is Bill Tuiloma not one of the best four centre backs in All Whites contention? I mean, he's probably good enough to be a starting centre back for the All Whites, but he hasn't been playing much at club level, and you got to be demanding that stuff. Is CJ Bot no longer the best right back for the Football Ferns? Incorrect. She is the best right back for the Football Ferns, but you sort of this is a harder one because she has been playing a lot and playing relatively well for Leicester City. But you got to make a point with some of these things sometimes. So it's not a decision I would have made. It's I think it's a little bit excessive to be dropping someone, but I can understand the logic behind it,
Beauty. We will wrap up our niche cast there. We'll keep coming this week with more podcasts, so stay tuned to all the platforms, all the channels, and of course the niche-coach.com. Pick up yourself, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, church.